Oh, I see you. Hello, Taam.
Hey guys.
How are you?
Really good.
Good.
It's a little bit early here. It's 7 a.m. in the
Oh,
morning. Yeah.
that is early, but thank you so much for coming and we appreciate it. So, are you ready? You feeling ready for your talk?
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. Okay, well, let me introduce you a little bit, and then if it's okay, I have a fun icebreaker question to ask you before you get into your talk. And just to
Okay.
give everybody an overview of the rest of the evening, Taam here will give her presentation. And it's just a short lightning talk, but we're really excited for that. She's a great speaker. She had a chance to speak at the ng-conf conference just, I don't know, a handful of months ago, but we all loved her presentation so much that we wanted to have her come and share at one of our events as well. So after Taam, though, we'll have just a brief Q&A with her on her talk. And then the whole rest of the night, we will do a discussion panel with Kate and with Alisa, and Aileen and I will just be asking them all sorts of questions and having a great discussion. And then we will save some time at the end for Q&A with them as well. And then at the very end, we'll give our prize out. So that's kind of an overview of the rest of the night. But yeah, so Taam is a software engineer at a company called KMS Technology, which is based in Vietnam. And like I said, she's a speaker at, she spoke at ng-conf, and we're excited to have her here tonight. But Taam, I was reading on your LinkedIn that you originally, when you got into programming, you were kind of aiming at becoming like a mobile game designer. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, I really love playing games in back in the day when I was in ninth grade in high school. So playing games, I really want to create some like interesting games like League of Legends. It's really fantastic game. So being a game developer is my first dream when I come to this like industry of information and technology. But then I realized that my love for games is not that big, so I I turned to become a girl developer, like web developer.
Nice. Well, we're glad to
Yeah.
have you, but I'm curious. So you mentioned League of Legends, but are there other games that you really like playing?
Yeah, mostly is about mobile games.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anything
they
in
are.
particular?
Mm, like I haven't played them for ages. Like Clash of Clans and PUBG and some other cooking games. A lot
Oh,
of
nice.
games on mobile.
Fun.
I can see that they put a lot of effort and ideas and uh, their time into every single of the mobile games. So I want to be a part of them. I also want to build something that can help people, that can give the people the some benefits.
Yes.
So even though that I am not a game developer, like I want to be at the very first place, but actually our purpose is like the same. We want to build something. We want to use that thing to help people, to help their community.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're excited to have you, and the time is yours.
Okay. Uh, so now I'm gonna share my screen and start my presentation. All right. Before I start my presentation, I want to have a disclaimer. Is that yesterday when I checked on my slides, and they are all gone, so I have to sit back and prepare all of the slide again.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know that it's not perfect like the previous slides, but I hope that it would be enough to deliver and provide enough information for my presentation.
We are just fine. It'll be great.
Yeah. All right. Let me on this. So you guys can see on my screen, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So this is one of my favorite topic that I would like to share with you guys. With you girls, I'm sorry. So the topic is Angular directive selectors can do more than you think. Let me introduce a little bit about myself. I know that I have been introduced before, but yeah. So my name is Taam, and my Twitter is right here, TaamDev151, and I'm currently working on KMS technology as a web developer. So about our topic today, before I jump into my presentation, I would like to sum up for a little bit. So we are really used to the Angular directive selector, Angular directive in general, right? So we usually use the directive to add additional behavior to our template. And just recently, I've just found out that the Angular directive selectors are really powerful. And this is what I am going to show you today. First of all, I'm going to show you a very basic example on how we usually use Angular directive in our project. Okay, so we have a template here rendered in on the browser, and these are the URL. So my boss used to tell me that he wants me to implement a custom directive for those URL, so that when I click on the URL, it have to open it in a separate window, and all at the same time, each of the URL, when it is rendered, it needs to have a keyword rel inside the URL. So how should we do this? I'm gonna create a custom directive, Angular directive. So I'm gonna call it like something like ng external link, and I use the host binding rel so that every time I use the directive inside the URL, it will automatically render the keyword rel here. So the thing that I want to deliver to you through this example is the selector that I am using here. Imagine if we have a lot of URLs in our components, we may miss when because we have to put the director inside the template so the URL can work. And imagine we have a lot of URLs in our project, in our component, in our module. We can miss them. We can miss one of them. So there should be another way for the directive selector to capture all of the URL in the component and then apply the directive at once. With that thinking, I am going to have a solution is that I'm gonna select them. I'm trying to find the best way to select them as much generic as I can. So here it is. I try to select all of the A tab in the project which has the target blank, and I try to target to the A tab which doesn't have any rel tab yet. So with this way of select the elements on the template, I am trying to capture all of the URL, and I'm not gonna miss it, because with the old implementation I have to put in every URL, I have to put the directive ng external link here. But when I try to change the way I select the, I change the way I implement the selector of my directive, it becomes more and more easier. So I just bring this external link directive and import it in the module that I like to apply the ng external link. So do you think that this kind of selector, it looks really familiar, right? Because that's the way that the CSS selector work. Looking at some keyword like not and a here. So I have one takeaway for you. A little bit. I have one takeaway for you before we move to the main course is that whenever we are implementing a custom directive, Angular directive, let's think it as CSS selector, because it will help us to capture, to target to the elements in a very, very generic way. All right, so that's just a starter, just a basic simple example that I would like to introduce before I jump into the main course today. The main course is that my boss again, he wants me to implement share button for all of the component in the project, because we have so many buttons in the project. So we want to capture the all of them into one share button component. So this is what I used to do before I know about the power of Angular directive. Like everybody else, I'm gonna create a share button component right here with the input, like the button text, button color, disable, invalid, label, and then on the template, I have the button right here with the class. The class that would be like, if the button theme is primary, it would be btn primary. And the button text is here. It would represent for the label of the button and the button color. Yeah. So this is the share button that I used to implement when we want to capture all of the button into a share component. But there is one problem for this thing. Here's the thing. When we create a directive for a share button, we call it share button. Oh, I'm sorry. When we create a share button component, we call it, the selector would be share button. And how do we use it? We use it as, let me see. Oh, it's not here. So when we want to use the share button, we just bring this selector on over the project and use it, right? So the problem is that when we try to put the entry template or entry container into the button, it's become more and more complicated. For example, if I want to input a button content, which is a template ref, and I put it in here. So let's see it here. If I have a button, it should be a button to when we click on it and it take action, right? And the second thing is that a button can be a link, and we click on the button and it opens a new link. So I need to have an entry switch here with a button type, and based on the type, it will render a button or an A tag based on the type of button. If it's a button, I will render the button here. But if it's an internal link, I will have to render the A tag here. So I think it's pretty complicated for a share button component for a template. So I think that I will have a better approach for this. I am not going to use the share button anymore because it also doesn't scale very well. We can see that I have told you that we have the list of input here, right? So if we want to put more, if we want to use more the attributes of the native button, we will have to put a lot of input here, and the list of input would be very, very long, because when you check on the attributes of the native element, it's a very long list. It's not only about the text or the disable, it's about hidden invalid label, a lot of them. So if you want to use all of that attributes of the button, you have to put a lot input here, maybe 20 or 30 inputs inside our share component. And it doesn't look very well, because we the more we want to use the attributes, the more we have to add, the more input we have to add into our share button component. So I have another idea. We're gonna create a component that would utilize the attribute selector to reuse, to extend all of the native buttons. How can we do it? We will not use the share button component anymore, but I'm gonna use a selector directive. And the selector would be like, I will target to all of the button and all of the A tab in the component, in the module, which has the directive share button. And I put in the template ng-conf. How can we use this? All right. So if my component has a button and I put the share button directive right here, and everything that I put inside the button will be appear in the ng-conf. So the button that I have here would be like a button and a label joy, and next to the label joy is Angular icon. This code looks really, really simple than the previous one, because with the button right here, we can use their attributes without define any inputs anymore. I'm gonna do a comparison between the first solution that I have done with the share button component and the second solution that I have done with the directive. I put the share button directive inside a button. It can be an A tab here, which depends on what do you want to do. So if I want to put a label and an icon into my button, I just put them here because they are originally the ng-conf. But with the first approach, if I want to put something into my button, I have to define a template, which is called button template, and I pass it into the button content, and then go inside the share button. We're gonna render that template. Very, very complicated. So I love I really like the bottom approach, because it's really short and brief and can solve our problems. So literally, this way of using Angular directive can win the original share component. So what do we have today? What do I want to deliver today is that the Angular directive selectors can work as a CSS selectors. As we can see that, let's go back for a little bit here. This is the way that a CSS selector used to work at the moment. So instead of just doing the normal way that we use the directive, we can try to think it out of the box. Try to select the element in a more generic way by think about the Angular directive like CSS selector. All right, and another takeaway that I would like to bring to you is that we should use the attribute selector for a component so that we can extend a lot of native elements attributes. Like I showed you before, there are a long list of attributes like the invalid, disable, label, a lot of them. If we use the original way that we create a shared component, we have to add a lot of inputs because we have so many native element attributes. But if we only use the approach with the directive, putting inside a button or an A tag, like I showed you before, we do not have to define any inputs, and we just jump inside and use the attributes because the button is right here. It's originally a native element. All right, so I think that's all for me today. Just want to know, hopefully that you get some piece of information after my talk, because I really love this topic, and I hope that people will use the Angular directive and in a creative and in an effective way, more than the normal way that we used to do. Okay, so this is my thank you dance. Thank you for listening to my presentation today.
Thank you so much, Taam. This was really insightful for everybody. We have one question from the audience, so I'll go ahead. So what do you think about the new built-in control flow that has been proposed by Angular team to make if-else blocks for loops and switch statements better and less complex?
Oh, can I read the
Sure.
question on chat?
It's in the QA chat.
It's here, right?
I can share in the chat if it's easier.
All right.
This is from Marcus.
Built-in control flow that has been proposed by Angular team. Oh, let's make blocks. I actually haven't had a chance to take a look at the new built-in control flow that you have mentioned. I'm sorry, I don't think I can answer your question right now. But yeah, maybe we can talk more through my Twitter, because right after this presentation, I'm gonna jump right into the new built-in control of Angular, and we can talk more about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Taam. We'll be on the lookout for that. Again, thank you so much for your presentation. Really insightful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Taam. That was excellent. I love the little dancing
Yeah.
here at the end. It's cute. So cool.
I just want to apologize for the slides. They are not as perfect as I want, because it's
awesome.
a little bit hard to understand. I don't know, but hopefully that next time I can do it better. I'm just gonna make up the slide before I go to sleep.
I think they were great. They gave exactly the information that we needed, and I thought that the code snippets were excellent. So no worries, and you did a great job. We really appreciate it.
Okay, so should I stop my screen, or?
Yeah, we'll get
Yes,
into our discussion. We'll have Kate and Alisa come and join us. And I'll introduce both of them. Like I said, these are two fantastic developers. We had a chance to talk there at ng-conf and just kind of, came up with this idea of having this solution space for women and for programmers. And again, I want to really thank them for their ideas and their thoughts, their input. But just to give you an idea of who each of them are, Alisa is I don't know about but she is a senior developer advocate at Okta. And she's also been an important member of the Kansas City Women in Tech group. So this was before she moved to the Pacific Northwest, but she's also one of the co-organizers at NG Girls. And then she's been a co-director at Coding and Cocktails. Very fun get together. They're also in Kansas City, I believe. But then she's also, I think this is really important for tonight's discussion. Alisa is a former chemist, and she had an excellent career with that before she got into programming. So this is one of the things that I love about Alisa, is that she had that other career and just made that transition, and she's really just, she dove into the profession and has really made a great career for herself here in programming as well. But then Kate Sky, our other guest for tonight, is currently a consultant with Hero Devs, and she's also been a mentor with ng Girls. And then she has given talks at ng-conf, and she's been a guest on several podcasts, including WebRush. And then most importantly, Kate is the proud mother of 5 kids. So something I really admire about Kate is that she keeps a really great work-life balance and makes her family one of the most important things in her life. So I really admire that about her. But welcome to both of you. How are you guys doing tonight?
Well,
Awesome.
Yeah, very well. Thank you for the great introduction.
yes, that's very sweet.
You're welcome. I mean, every last bit of it, though. I always love connecting with both of you and excited for tonight. So I have some great questions for you. Aileen and I have some questions we want to really dig into and just make it a fun discussion, and something where, hopefully we can inspire other women in programming and help them to find solutions to questions they have or problems they have, or something I think we all need is inspiration. We all deal with things like imposter syndrome or just the ups and downs of programming. So that's what we're really here for, is to talk about a handful of things, but we'll see how far we can get. I did want to start, Alisa, I mentioned there in your introduction that you used to be in, was it a chemist, or what exactly was your job title?
It was chemist, and I made paints. So it was industrial coatings. Yes.
Okay. So talk to us about that. Like what has been the most challenging part about getting into programming after having had a successful career doing something else?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's always tough, right, to make a change. And especially, I was a chemist for 10 years. So it was really a big change. You basically walk away from everything you've learned, everything you've built up, and you have to start over. But it was a challenge I was ready to tackle and take on and grow. So the other thing to keep in mind also is that I was not young when I did that, right? After 10 years. So when I went to my new job as a developer, I was one of the oldest people on that team. Right? Everybody was much younger. They were right out of college, and that was not me. So not only do you have somebody who are, I'm young in spirit, thank you, somebody who is, brand new to development, but also kind of feel like you're coming in as a disadvantage, right? So it feels like it's like stacked against you. That said, I was incredibly lucky at where I landed, and the place that I started working first was a fantastic company, really, really supportive. It was a really great place to be. So having that support system, I think, is really helpful anytime you make a change or have anything uncomfortable.
One thing that I remember, because I came from education myself, like I did not go to school for programming, but one thing that I found really hard was that you get really good at what you're doing, right? You have this whole career before, and you get to this point where you're very proficient, you're you feel confident with what you're doing. And then it's really off-putting because you go from being able to do things independently, you're, like I said, you're confident, you're able to do all these things. But when you make that transition, all of a sudden, especially with programming, you have to get used to being uncomfortable and you have to get used to asking other people for help. And that's not something I do very easily. So that was really hard for me, but I don't know. And really this is open to everybody, not just Alisa, but is that, how did you deal with getting more comfortable with that and just the process of pair programming and having to rely on other people, but also just not feeling very good anymore at what you were doing?
Yeah, was really, really tough. And I'm sure myself, you probably very similarly, many people, imposter syndrome kicks in and you feel like, oh no, I'm so far behind, right? I'm so far behind. For me, I tend to counteract that by putting in some really ridiculous hours and extra time to learn. And I completely understand that is not a viable course for everybody, but that was how I coped with it. And at some point, you have to have some realization of it's okay to ask a question, right? And I think that's actually one good thing about being, say, an older person making a transition is I feel like some of the same feelings of really self-confidence that I see younger women face. As an older woman at the time, I'm like, well, I don't know this. So I'm going to have to make myself vulnerable and ask. And if that's becomes judgment on me, then I guess that's what it is. I just move on.
Alisa.
So I think that's, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's just something that we all of us, and then women included, learn as we get older, right? It's just, we have to learn to stop caring so much about what other people think.
I agree. You mentioned this supportive company. Could you enumerate the key items that you feel were supportive? Like if any other company wants to replicate that, what could you describe as the supportive company?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. So the thing I loved most about this company, and unfortunately they were bought up by others, and so it's no longer around, is that they had a really, really great culture of learning. I think that was the big thing. So we were all learning together. There was lunch and learns. Everybody ate lunch together because they catered in lunch. And we would all just talk about things that were interesting it wasn't work related, but things that were interesting to us, things that we, learned about on the side. There was a lot, it was C++ place. So there was a lot of conversations about the C++ standards that were coming up. It was just a really great learning environment.
Kate, have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome yourself? And I think especially as a consultant, you have to work pretty independently, but how have you dealt with these kinds of things yourself?
Actually, my imposter syndrome kind of showed its ugly head when I started doing some public speaking. And so because a lot of people tell me, oh, you could do public speaking, this is so good for your career and everything, and you think you know a lot of things, but actually speaking about it, it's so intimidating. And most people who do it are not women. It's a numbers game. So for me, it was just kind of the approach that I was told to take on that is as a startup approach. And I was recommended a book about how startup businesses start and just do it kind of approach. It was so hard to overcome the fear, but yeah, it's hard. I think my first meetup I canceled because I was so fearful. I actually pretended I was sick or something.
Well, okay, let's talk about that, because this is actually something that's been on my mind a lot lately. And granted, my background is working at ng-conf, and then even when I was at Thinkster.io and I was helping developers to make courses, it was something that I did notice that, yes, this is a numbers game. Like you said, there are just more men in our profession than women. And so of course you're going to have more men submitting to give talks and all of that. But how can we support and encourage more women to give talks? Because I think women give amazing presentations, and there's no reason that we should feel like we can't deliver just as an effective presentation as any man, right? So what can we do though? How can we support each other in submitting to a CFP or not canceling, right? Like not letting those fears get the best of us. But does anybody have ideas or suggestions of how because all three of you have been presenters or speakers in some kind of arena or another, but what suggestions can you offer?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go first while it's fresh in my mind. What really helped me, even with ng-conf presentation, I had so much support from the organizers. Not only like they checked in on me, they always encouraged me like, no, you can do this. Like they reviewed my slides. They helped me just like psychologically. They would just like talk to me because I was going through like a lot of changes in my life, going through divorce. So I was like so overwhelmed by everything I was doing. And then I had this talk and I'm like, I don't think I can just like put everything personal and professionally together and deliver a good talk. But people just checked on me. They just like always, pinged me and said, Kate, how are you doing? What can we do to help you? And I think even inviting women to do talks versus submitting for RFCs is so important because a lot of women are just they're just not confident enough to do it, or they're fearful or imposter syndrome, whatever you call it. But we're just not in the same state of mind as men are. I think, like, based on my feelings, I feel like women are just not as confident, and we don't just go for it. Sometimes we need to kind of be guided towards there. And when I mentor the people that listen to me, when I mentor, I always tell them, like, why don't you start teaching other people about what you're learning? And there's a lot of resistance because people are afraid that somebody's gonna think something bad about us or something like that. So just encouraging and finding that support system, I think, is very important.
I absolutely agree. I think having a support system, whoever, whether that's the work, whether that's the organization that you're speaking at, or if it's your group of friends, right? Whoever it is, having a support system. And I think it is also really important to invite diverse speakers. You're not going to get necessarily that submission. I absolutely agree. So invite women, invite groups from underrepresented, devs from underrepresented groups.
Any thoughts, Aileen?
Yeah, I was just wondering also on the question as to, you have 5 kids. If you go to a conference, how do you deal with that, right? I mean, that's another personal thing. Like, are conference also providing this support?
Well, this year I did not speak at the conference, but the year I did speak at the conference, obviously I was invited and it was all paid for. That was really nice. The challenging part about a single parent is finding somebody else to watch your kids. Although it's becoming a little bit better, but like this year I had to ask a family member to watch my kids. And I think for those lucky enough to have a partner, the partner support is so important, because if you have children and both of you are developers, and if a wife is speaking at a conference, somebody has to stay behind and watch the kids, and I don't think it's competition and who goes, right? Like, I think it's just important to give that support to your partner to be able to also go to conferences. And I hope there was 2 ng-conf for those that have a family of 2 Angular developers, twice a year kind of thing for those kind of situations. But ideally, I think even if it's every other year, one goes or the other goes. But if I know some families brought their children to ng-conf. That was really nice to see. It was so beautiful to see children at the conference.
I do want to ask you more about balancing family and work, but I want to give just one additional thought on this idea of speaking as well. And that is that I think sometimes when we get rejected from giving a presentation, we take that to heart. And I would just encourage anybody who submits to speak at a conference that if your talk is not selected, please don't take that the wrong way. Like, I've been lucky enough to be able to sit on some of the ng-conf decision panels, and there's a lot that goes into making the decision of who speaks at the conference or not. And almost never, is it, well, I guess I'll say it this way, like some of the talks are pre-selected. And if there's a talk that's selected on a specific topic and you just so happen to submit a talk on that same topic, the one that was pre-selected is going to be chosen. I mean, that's just how sometimes it goes. And so, you could have submitted a talk that at any other conference would have been selected. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is you just never know the factors that are going into why the the speakers were selected, and don't take it personally. There's just a lot that goes into it. Try again and submit multiple at once. Like don't just submit one presentation idea only. Try submitting 2 or 3 or 4 talks on a variety of topics, and your chances of being selected will go up from there. But just something to keep in mind. Don't take it to heart. Don't think that it means that you're a terrible developer or that you should never submit again. But just some thoughts there. But then, yeah, Kate, I do want to get into how are you balancing family and work life? Because I know that's something that's challenging for any developer. It's so easy, especially when we work remotely, to have our job seep into our personal time, but especially with, you being a single mother. How is that something that you've really been able to effectively do?
Well, I do have 2 older children who are 16 and 14 who help me a lot with younger. And even my 27-year-old son, who doesn't live with us anymore, comes out and he helps me. Like, it's a big effort on the whole team. Like the whole team effort is within my family. So teaching kids responsibilities is one thing. And I have very understanding company that I work for. They know I'm a single mother of this many children. And but I get my work done. Like my work is at the top of the priorities always, as well as my children. Obviously, children would go first, but I get my work done. But to keep my sanity is actually just living a healthy lifestyle. Like I always make effort to go and work out and eat healthy and get some fresh air, and that keeps me sane and. Trying to just create like positive, not feelings, but like surrounding myself with positive people and having positive experiences. And that's I just go with the flow. I don't really try not to stress out about like the kinks in the road, they always happen. Like my 14-year-old broke her toe right before the tryouts for tennis.
Oh, man.
And that was very painful to watch her, because 2 days later she just, I did take her to get an X-ray. It was fractured, but 2 days later she was like, "I'm still playing, I'm still going," and she somehow still got onto the team and made it work. So I think that's just a representation of my life. There's bad things will happen, but we just kind of work through them.
Amazing, cute. I know both of you are mentors. Like, what have you guys seen? Like, what have you learned from mentoring young women in tech?
So I think this is maybe not necessarily from mentoring, like in the traditional sense through coding and cocktails with your ng girls. But in general, I would say the one thing I have to remind not just myself, but other women who I'm mentoring is to not impose their own constraints onto things and to not pre-disqualify themselves from things. So it's not always like, don't tell yourself no, such as, oh, this submission for this topic on this speaking at this conference isn't good enough. Go ahead, just do it, right? Let the organizers tell you that it's not going to be a good talk. Apply for that job. Don't feel like you're not qualified to apply for a particular job because you look at the prereqs for it and you're like, oh no, I only meet X number of these items. Apply for it anyway. Let the hiring manager say, nope, never mind. So don't pre-disqualify yourself from things. Go for it.
I'll go next.
Yeah.
So I think most of the things that I'm learning are about myself. Because every time I speak to somebody who's getting into this career, I see myself 25 years ago, kind of doubting myself, am I going to be able to do this? And I think it used to be so much easier to get into programming before than now. And they have to learn so many things. But what I do envy is seeing them having an exact road on where they're going. Because, you know, they're like sponges. They ask the information, like, what should I learn? Should I learn this? Because this sounds like it's part of, you know, this job description. Or, you know, am I supposed to know this? Or, you know, or I'm not sure if I can ever do this. Why this is so much work, you know, like this is so hard. And just talking through that and then, you know, and just having the understanding that I've been through this and look at me, like I've done this, and if I've done this, you can do this. And I pretty much approach everything I learn in my life. If somebody else did it and I want to do it, I just have to go for it. I'll be able to do it. Yes, I might change my mind and not do it, but at least if I want to try it, if somebody else achieved this goal, I can achieve it as well. And so I'm constantly learning new things about myself. And I just see like my two nieces who how hard they worked on their projects, how hard they're learning. It's just like, and they also have children. And I think the mothers who go into programming they're going to be the biggest asset for the company because they know how to multitask. They can do this. So at the times when we were disadvantaged and like looked down upon are over. I think like we're all that. I think this meetup should have been something around Barbie movie, because if you remember the speech on the Barbie movie, anyone who watched that movie, the speech that the Barbies was it Barbie who said it or the girl who was
the mom, I think.
Yeah, the mom. I mean, it's so on. Like we can do everything, and you know, we could still achieve a great career. We could still be mothers. We could, you know, we could be leaders. All these things are possible, and if we put our minds to it, we can do it.
I think one of the best things for me, as far as like mentors and learning from mentors, is, and I think this goes across. It doesn't matter what your position is. If you're a mentor, a coworker, just whatever. I have so appreciated when I've had team members and mentors say, I don't get it either. Or, yeah, I struggled with that either. Or, yeah, that is really confusing code. You know, when other people who you look to as being more senior than you or more experienced than you, and they open themselves up to that vulnerability as well. And well, if this is confusing code, no wonder it doesn't make sense to you. Or, you know, just admitting that they don't know either. They don't have the answers. I have no idea. Let's find out together. I love that because it shows it. I don't know. It just helps you to feel like, okay, like I'm normal. This is fine. You know, don't stress about it. But I would just encourage anybody, whether you're a coworker or in a management position, to share that as often as you can so that other people feel more comfortable and less stressed about not having the answers themselves. But I think we have time for one more question before we get into Q&A.
Can I add one thing about that?
Yeah, please.
Brooke, yes, I like to say that the difference between a junior and a senior is that the senior just knows better search terms to Google. That's the only difference, right? But we're all still Googling.
Yeah, I love that. It's true though, it really is, but I love it. So, okay. Have either one of you, because I know this has come, I will admit, like I have questioned as I've gone from being a teacher to going through boot camp, working at ng-conf, which really wasn't programming, to then getting into programming. Like it's been a bit of a journey, but here I am. And there have been days when I've just said, am I really where I belong? Was this really the right thing, or did I make a mistake? And whether you come from being a chemist or you went straight into being a developer, have there ever been times for all three of you when you've ever considered leaving the industry, and whether or not you've had that, that question, what has kept you passionate and going and just pushing forward?
For me, I always thought that I could be more successful, maybe running my own business. Don't ask me why, it's just my set of mind. And I had little breaks when I had my children, and I would always think, oh, maybe I can do this or that. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm good in sales. I don't think I can do this. It's too much. Like you have to sell things. And not until I realized that programming is just another sales job. All you have to do is sell yourself, but you only have to sell it once per project. So much easier. This is when I kind of okay, so all you have to do is you just have to build a product so good. It has to be so valuable that, that you could just, because in fact, you are the product of your company, and the company might be your just full-time employer or consultant like I am, but you're still a product. And if you provide value, you're pretty much an entrepreneur and just have a product of one. To me, I said, I know how to do this really, really well. I really like learning new things. Why am I thinking about other ways to do this? So this, for me, I just realizing that I just need to niche down into this one area and just make it as profitable as possible, because I like what I'm doing, and why not just stick to this? This is kind of was my train of thought, but I had a lot of times where I kind of deviated in my train of thought, where I'm going to go maybe a different direction. And I'm glad that it all worked out the way it did. And I think there are more bigger and better things ahead.
Now, I've been lucky in that I've been really, really thrilled with making the transition from chemistry to tech, and I love what I do. But I completely also understand that, if you make a transition or you get into tech and turns out it's not your thing, it's okay to also admit that, and then find a way that you find, bring your passion to whatever it is that you're doing, right? Totally get it. I would say that you would want to find a support group. You would want to have a group regardless. I know that I personally have found that really helpful to have a group of other women in tech that I reach out to, I chat with. I say, hey, so I encountered this. Does that seem okay? Or did that seem kind of strange to you? So having somebody to talk to like that is really, really great. And then also meeting people at conferences or meetups or things like that, right? Especially now that we're all remote, having those connection points with other people, I think is really helpful to make sure that you are in a good place, that you're still happy with what you're doing, that you're learning new things. So that's what's been helpful for me in terms of being happy with where I am. And I think, somebody asked when I made the transition from chemistry to tech, and that was 15 plus years ago now. So it was a little while ago. But yeah, it's none of it's easy. I totally get it. I feel for anybody who might be grappling with that question for themselves.
I think too, it's important to remember that if you make the transition into being a software engineer and you don't feel like it's quite for you, there's a lot of positions still within tech that you can find that happy place for you. And it's okay to make that switch and to do some exploring. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I think we feel like we've failed somehow, but that's just part of your journey, and that's okay. And I think just being patient with yourself and understanding and enjoying the journey, it isn't a failure. It's just part of you finding you, and that's great.
We have some questions from the audience to complement this panel, so I'm just going to go ahead and read them if anybody wants to answer them. So Alejandro asks, could you please mention a few techniques that work for you to overcome some of your public speaking fears?
I can actually speak to that a tiny bit myself, which I was really fortunate to be able to take part in the meetup here and also get a bit of an introduction into podcasting. But for me, doing these kinds of things where I am behind the screen and I can't see everybody, I think that's been really helpful. And we all have Zoom. I think there are ways for you to be able to practice without having an audience in front of you. And for me, that has helped, because then I was able to get more confident with just speaking my mind, or learning the motions of thinking a couple of sentences ahead of what's actually coming out of my mouth, if that makes sense. So practicing with online events or giving small presentations at your work, I think helps. Being with people that you're more comfortable with in those small settings, that has helped me to gain a lot of confidence and not worry that when I gave my talk at ng-conf in June, I was still scared, don't get me wrong, but I think just having had all this practice gave me that confidence to just get up there and do it.
Alisa, you want to say something?
Yes, agreed. A lot of practice, start small. Also, just because we may have overcome it for a particular conference doesn't mean that we still aren't fearful. Public speaking is still super uncomfortable for me. I don't particularly like it, but it's a way that I try to push myself to grow, and I purposely make myself uncomfortable in that way. It's not for everybody, and I totally get it. So yeah, start small and just remember that everybody's rooting for you. They want you to succeed. So.
Yeah, it's definitely not performance that gives like a task like, oh, can you do it, or can you? Everybody's actually there to support you and to help you out, and all the techniques that you guys mentioned. I agree with everything. I don't think I have anything else other than it's just like another skill you have to keep practicing.
Amazing. And just one final one, everybody, welcome to answer. So how do you go about being a resource for others to reach out? And how do you put yourself out there for others to reach out as a resource to co-workers and developers, etc.? How do you put yourself out?
For me, one thing that has helped is joining groups like the meetup here, where you're connecting and networking with others, and then really engaging with people, not just sitting back and, coming and attending, but actually starting to engage and talk with people, networking, but then offering. I think a simple offer goes a long way. I know for me, for example, I can share a quick story about how when I was, I still hadn't quite learned how to be a developer yet. And yet what I had done was join a meetup, and I was there and I was participating, I was volunteering, I was, actually putting in some time. And then through that, I got to know some of the other attendees, the other organizers. And just in our everyday conversations, they got to know more about me, and that I really wanted to be a programmer. And so they just they extended that, hey, why don't you, let's meet twice or 3 times a week. And that was what made all the difference in the world. But I had to put myself in those places. I had to be there, and I had to be engaging with people. And I think that was a really big part of how I found that mentorship. So I would just encourage others to do that. Go join these meetups. We're always happy to take more organizers here at this meetup, or maybe find some there at your work. But I think you have to put yourself in those places and then really just start engaging with people.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Brooke. That you have to give yourself, make yourself a little bit vulnerable, right? And put yourself out in a way. So like signing up to be a speaker at this meetup, or if you want to start smaller with your own coworkers, maybe something to say is, hey, I learned a new thing. Is it okay if I share it with you? I want to practice my speaking skills, right? And that's okay as well if it's something like that, and something small as well. So I honestly really love your journey into tech as well, and the transition you made, and all that. I think it's super inspiring for everybody to hear it.
Oh, I appreciate that. I've definitely dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome, so I appreciate hearing that.
Well, for me, I mostly meet people offline, people who are around me, who know that what I do. It's really fun to have like young people who are going to college or are thinking about this career approach me and ask me like, oh, so Miss Kate, we've heard you're a programmer. Could you tell us a little bit more about this? Like, because most kids like who are interested in this career, they just want to know how much money you make. But you can't really say it straight up because you don't want to be like, it's just not an information that you want to share with people. But I want to be open and present it in the most beautiful way, because I think it is a great career for anyone who's interested. And I tell parents, actually, like my friends who are parents, and if they have children, I always tell them like, hey, if he is interested, see if he wants to reach out, and I'll tell him some of the tricks of the game, because I think finding mentors and people who are going to help you get to that point. Like, for example, this one son of my friend that reached out, he wanted to get into cybersecurity, and I'm not a cybersecurity developer, or I'm not in that area. So I pointed him to what he needs to seek out in order to get into that career. And just letting people know that I'm completely open. I'm in the point of my career where I want to help other people. Like if it's your child, if it's you, I've had someone's wife reach out to me. We talked about if it's possible because some people are just like, is it possible for me to get into this career? I am so like years old, and it's just it's beautiful to see people with open heart, just interested in their own ability. They're asking me to validate it, and to me it's very fulfilling. And I'm surprised that a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to really bother you, but can I ask you a question? But I'm always so open, like, to help people. And if I were to help anyone offline, it would be Twitter. I have Instagram page. Those would probably be the best ways to reach out to me. And I'm completely open book, like I can talk to anyone.
I'm glad you mentioned social media, because I kept thinking of that too, where engage in the conversation, right? Just jump in on the conversations. When you see other developers asking questions or posting things themselves, add something to it, post on it, remark, make your own comments and add to it. And then if you do that, long enough, people start seeing you as a kind of a mentor, and you'll definitely, I promise you, you'll have people start reaching out to you, asking you questions. But then also another thing that came to mind was create content. If you're writing blog articles or making videos, even short 5-minute tutorials, things like that, I think, again, when people see that you're creating that content, they start to look to you for answers, and they'll start asking you those questions. And then through those conversations, you can always offer to be their mentor and things like that. But yeah, I would just say create content. One example I can share as well is Jason, one of our co-organizers here at the meetup. He, for a long time, had wanted to do live streaming and finally just dove into it, and he's been so amazing at it. I think it's 3 times a week, and he goes and he does these live streams for 2, sometimes 3 hours at a time. But it's just a great way for people to come and ask questions. And again, if you don't have that kind of time commitment, or if live streaming just doesn't interest you, I think a really easy thing to do is just jump in on those social media conversations. Any last thoughts? Aileen, do you have any suggestions on that question?
Yeah, I guess it's, I mean, I cannot say I know everything. I think we're always learning. Nobody is an expert as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong, because, but I think the idea of offering what you know, and I think you guys already mentioned the fact of, if you learn something, share it. I think that's how I commit myself to learn something. If I learn it and I can explain it, okay. But if I commit that to somebody else, that's like another level of responsibility that makes you share and make it explainable. And I think that's how I managed to learn. I'm not an expert, but if I can learn it, share it, and explain it, that's how I can put myself out. I understood enough to explain it, and that's my safe space, right? I can share about that. I don't know about other things, but I can definitely later learn as a question get asked and so on. So that would be my take.
I love it. Okay, well, everybody, thank you for asking your questions, and thank you again to Alisa and Kate for coming, and Taam, thank you so much for your presentation as well. I loved this. I thought this was an awesome conversation. I'm so excited to keep doing more of these.